Cool. Okay. So, class, or this is awkward, isn't it? It's a little bit awkward. Okay, so we're trying something new. People watching on the YouTube where we're trying to do a tutorial video while I'm teaching. Liam is shaking his head. He's not enjoying
I
this.
don't see how it's any more awkward.
I don't know. You know what's the most awkward is like talking into the computer by yourself in a room, and then someone walks in and you're like, "Oh, I'm just recording a video tutorial on MATLAB."
It's gonna be so long.
Okay, it can only be 15 minutes because I have the free trial. Okay. So we're gonna Screencast-O-Matic. Yeah. Okay. So let's run this just so we can see what it is. So example. So you type in the name of the script. Whoops. And run it. Okay. What is the initial velocity? Let's say 40. Launch angle in degrees. It gives me the initial velocity in the x direction. Your code is going to have to output the initial velocity in the y direction. Okay. But let's look at that plot. So we have this plot. Okay. So what are some things we need to add to it? Labels and titles. Okay. So we'll do that. I'll do a couple of them. Okay. But I want to go over this. I've already gone over that in my last tutorial. I went over that a little bit. So okay. So X label. You could say what? Horizontal distance, right? In meters. Bam. Okay, so press it. So then if we run it again, we can see what it's like, 45. You go over here. Okay, you see how it says horizontal distance meters. Okay, you'll do the Y and you'll do the title. Okay, no need to do a legend. Okay, but one thing I want to talk about is controlling. So the whole goal of this is you don't need to format the plot each time. The script automatically does it based on the user's inputs, right? Okay, so what are some things that are changing that we might want to keep the same? Like what needs to be constant in this? So something that, what?
If it does, you might have to change like how, like the distance on the y-axis. If it's like
Yeah.
cramping tight on
Yeah, so the axis might be something that's important, okay? And then also in the y. So like best case scenario would be if this axis was the same size as this axis, okay? That is a little harder to do, and we might come back to it after we figure out loops/statements, okay? And we'll be able to do it with that. But don't stress too much about it. You have this x-axis here already set because of the time. Does that make sense? And the y is kind of already set because of the time. So this is going to be okay like this. What we got to do, if you look at the problem, and you go to tutorial 3, this is the solutions one, so if you look real quick, you can see all the answers. I'm adding text to plot, okay? So use this sprintf function to convert data to string that can be used later. Then use text function to display text on graph. Okay, so here's an example. And we'll just copy and paste this in, okay? So add on your script file from problem 3 and 4, display 2 text boxes on the plot that show the distance traveled in the x direction and the maximum height reached. Okay, so let's go back to here. Okay. Distance traveled. Okay. So what am I missing that I'm using in this line of code here? Range, right? So I'm using the range as the variable, so I need a equation for range. That is just, whoops, there's my music. That's in here. I have it set up. Okay, so you're just doing initial velocity squared times sine of 2 angle divided by g. You could also use the kinematic equations just to solve for it. Okay, so we do range, range equals, what did I say, initial velocity squared? So that's v dot squared, okay, times sine of 2 times angle, right? And then when I divide it by, what was it? G, okay? And you divide it by G, which is 9.8, okay, and that gives me the range, okay? So then I'm gonna try to run this and see what happens, okay? Example. So line 16, 20. Why isn't this working? What is it trying to plot? What's x? So if you look at the text, so if we're typing in text, so we'll go down here, and I'm typing, oh, I did this wrong. So text is actually a function, so it needs to be like that. Okay, so it's kind of like how sprintf is a function, okay? But also, what is x? We're going to run this again and see the error, and we'll figure out why. Okay? Example, 45, 40. Okay, and then I go to the plot. Why is it like that? It looks pretty good. It looks like solitaire. But what is it doing? Look at that. Okay, so let's look at this plot. Okay? It's saying the distance traveled, but what is changing? Why is it plotting it like that? What are x? What is x right now?
The entire
It's an entire vector, right? If you look down here in our variables, x is a 1 by 100. So that's 100 places. What is y? It's also 1 by 100 vector, okay? So a lot of times in MATLAB, especially when you're running scripts that you've written, you're going to run into errors, okay? And a lot of times it's an error like this up here in the red, which tells you in the file example.m, line 16, column 10, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's where the error was. So it tells you exactly where it is. That helps a lot. That helps narrow it down. Still, sometimes you might have to think about it, but it tells you the general error of where it's running into trouble, okay? But other times, it's user error, or it's calculator error, or you're just writing a code. Logic error. That's what I'm looking for, okay? And so what does that mean is like, right now, this is a logic error because I'm using a vector where it should be a single coordinate. Does that make sense? So how do you check that? Always be checking what your variables actually are and if they make sense, okay? So if your time's a negative, right here, so time equals, if it was negative 5.9, you'd be like, okay, something's off. And when was that happening for a lot of people? When they were still using degrees instead of radians. All their stuff was off, okay? So look at that and be like, okay, this is off because it doesn't make sense. And then you got to go through your code and figure it out. Another thing to do, and we'll talk about this more when we're actually writing stuff with loops and stuff like that, is you can like take parts of your code out and you could comment them. So if you do this, it doesn't run that line, and it doesn't run that line. So how does that help is you just kind of isolate certain parts of your code and see how they're working. And once again, that's going to make more sense when we get to more complicated things. Okay, but this is your friend here, this baby. Okay? Okay, so what do we need here? We need specific things, okay? So what I want, though, is this x and y. We'll call them x1 and y1. I want them based, once again, on the user input, right? Because our x and y axes are changing, right? Based this here, this x-axis, the length of it is changing based on our initial velocity. And the y is changing based on initial velocity or angle, right? So it's kind of got to be based on that. So I think the next step, we found the range, let's find the height too, okay? So height equals, and go back over here, and basically, how would you find the max height? The y at half a t, right? Does that kind of make sense? So it's the y at the peak, okay? So we go over here, okay? And what's the equation? It's vy underscore y times t divided by 2, okay? So that's the max time divided by 2, minus 0.5 times 9.8 times t squared, or t divided by 2 squared, okay? Does that kind of make sense? So that's giving us the max height, okay? So let's run this now. Right now we're just going to say, I'm going to get rid of this, okay? Not worry about that right now. So let's run it. We hit example, okay, 45, 40. Okay, and we look at our plot. It's looking good. You look here. And what I want to check is now the max height. So the max height I have as 42.678. And let's go over here and look. That kind of makes sense, right? That kind of fits here. So if you look at the variable height here, it's 42.6878, and that kind of matches what we got here. So that's a good way to check. Does that make sense? Yeah, what up? Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're going to now change this text box. Instead of, and see, you can say like height divided by 4 and range divided by 2. Okay, and so that's the x-coordinate is dependent now on the x-axis, and the y-coordinate is now dependent on the y-axis. So now if we run it, okay, and hit example, what is the initial velocity, meters per second, 40, 45, okay, and now we go to the plot, and it didn't work. Awesome. Why do you think it didn't work? Got 4 minutes to figure this out.
You can always hit pause.
I know, but it's more fun this way. Okay. So let's make sure all the variables are making sense. So display, let's see what that is. Distance traveled. Okay, so that's a thing. That's what's in here. Text. Let's look up help doc text. So this is a tool that you guys got to be comfortable with, okay? Bring it up. Adds text descriptions to data points. Okay. So x, y, and then the string. Okay, so we put the x, we put the y in. Let's do this. Let's look at an example just to see. So this is syntax. Pi and 0. Put the string in. Interesting. So that's kind of what we did, it looked like, right? What? You're not talking. I did. I didn't name it?
Not name it, but like, it said display equals sprint at.
Yeah, so this is creating a string. So that worked. So my display is a string. I'm going to make x1 equal to height divided by 4. y1 equal to range divided by 2. And then put those in here. See if that does anything. I doubt it will. Oh, I mixed up the x's and the y's. Oh, that's embarrassing. Does that make sense?
Yes, that would put it way off.
Yeah, that would put it way off. So I put, okay. So I made the x, what should have been the x, the y, and what should have been, okay, so now it's, so this wasn't a necessary change, that was. So then I run it. Okay. 45, 40. There we go. So you see how it's there? Okay. Thanks, Liam. Okay. Real quickly, one more thing I want to show you. Does anyone know how to change the range of the axes? Reba, you've done that, right? What did you use? What was the function?
Axes, parentheses, and then you just put the numbers in brackets.
Cool. So we're going to go from 0
It's x first.
to range, and then 0 to height.
You need to put x or y in that.
I don't think you do.
General, is it general?
It reads as
Well, it just,
x main, x max, y main, y max.
Okay.
so now you see how I changed that. And you might want to do like, instead of just height plus a percentage of the height. Does that make sense? Or height plus a little bit, okay? Cool. So this concludes our last tutorial for the day. Let's see if that worked.
Yeah, 50 seconds.
Any questions? Any questions for the video?
What's it like in the future?
It's a good question, yeah. Because you will be listening to this in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, comment below.
Comment below, yeah.
We should probably put a date on this.
Well, it tells it when it's uploaded, right?
Put the front page.
Now let's watch it back.